So we started this project. I got the idea of having the young architects from whatever offices we could get to work with us. And Don Frothingham and I, he was one of my partners in the Bassetti firm, Fred Bassetti and Company then. We got together, we made it known in the chapter what we were trying to do, and we got about 50 young architects, worked all through this very hot summer, and presented the project the next winter. It was just a great, inspiring activity among the young architects, and there were a few older ones. I don't think anybody was as old as I was. Jack Wright was a little older than I. We'd get beer and wine and potato chips and have discussions. Each group, there were about 5 or 6 groups, would discuss these things among themselves, and they would go off and study it. Finally, we had the projects that we thought were worthy. We worked with Shirley Collins, who was then Shirley Turner, the secretary of the chapter, and prepared a 64-page booklet, the Action Better City, ABC report, and decided to have a banquet. We invited about 300 people, about 100 architects came, and each architect was delegated to bring some guest, one of the movers and shakers in Seattle, a politician, a businessman, a union leader, a civic activist, anybody we could get. So we had 400 people in the ballroom at the Olympic Hotel and made this presentation. We had this fine banquet. I presented the thing in a sketchy way. Don Frothingham agreed to be the MC. We showed our movie and gave everybody a booklet. It made a sensation in Seattle.
Every great city has its epicenter, a baseline to match its skyline. For Seattle, the paths converge on Westlake Mall. A drugstore marks the spot. Free the space. Relocate a few businesses from the center to the sides. And within the intersection could grow a new heart for Seattle.
But I think the key to it all, too, was that we very early on got talking with people that were not architects. I mean, a city is more than architecture. That's a minor part of it, really. And so we had meetings, we had people coming in off the street, having a beer with us and talking about what they wanted. We had a meeting. There was a professor from the U, from the School of Social Work, I think, Professor Smith. I got the sense the contrast for somebody coming from New England was that here you could do things and things would happen, whereas back in New England or in the East, things were so fixed that, you know, the ordinary guy doesn't have much of a chance. This is a great place to people watch, and it does what it was intended. I think it's a little broken up, but it has a nice contrast of more intimate space here where you can get out of the sun, but it also is a great sun trap, and it's a great place to people watch. But you will go up the corner of 3rd and Seneca, and what are you going to see in the way of people up there except somebody desperately trying to go somewhere else? I think the city's come a long way. I think the real worry is in recognizing something more than the power and money. We're seeing a lot of that, and it has done a lot of things, wonderful things for this city. But I think the real worry I have is people being heard.
Almost every civilized city in Western Europe has a waterfront dedicated to its inhabitants. Seattle dedicated Elliott Bay to 8 lanes of overhead freeway, a concrete barricade between the people and the water.
We started by saying that obviously Seattle is blessed with a variety of water shoreline environments, and that we should take advantage of that variety by encouraging development and conservation of various kinds in various places. The traditional downtown central waterfront marine commerce was obsolete and was moving to the south, which you can see to this direction now, because the whole technology and the whole scale of commerce and the warehousing that was taking place, the use of container ships, etc., was being introduced. And what we essentially said was two things, and that is, one, in our design proposals, and I will say we overdid it, and that is we proposed that downtown Seattle should expand to the waterfront so that the waterfront would become an integral living part of the urban activity of downtown Seattle. The second point that we felt was also critical was to both literally and symbolically bring the water into downtown Seattle. There's one major missing ingredient, and that is we need to remove the Alaskan Way Viaduct. The advantages to Seattle, similar to what happened in San Francisco, would be tremendous. I mean, we could make this the most wonderful waterfront in relationship to a major downtown city as anywhere in the world.
The spectacular natural axis of the lake is defined by a cement plant and a gasworks. A few more years of purely industrial development and the best view of the lake will be from a plane at 5,000 feet. Careful zoning and public concern would halt the shrink and still preserve a balanced use of the water. The gasworks at the north end could become the lake's first public park. Tree-lined avenues would form a necklace of green with an excellent view of every passing boat.
Well, to me, Seattle is a remarkable city. And anyone who's lived here or has passed through here would recognize that because of its natural features, natural God-given features. And if man doesn't do too much to nullify that, it will continue to be an attractive city to live in and to observe and to enjoy as a visit and so forth. So it's a fabulous city, and I've always felt so fortunate to have this lake right in the middle of the city, right near the heart of the city. We can sit here and look at it and enjoy the view of it. We can go down and take a canoe or a kayak and go down to a street inn and put the canoe in or put the kayak in and go where we want to go and so forth. I know we felt that we should have streets that lead you to the lake. So you'd have tree-lined streets. For instance, Westlake, which runs from the heart of the city to the lake, we felt like that this street should be accentuated. So you're drawn to the lake and you can see views of the lake as you get closer to it. And I had visualized in one of our early studies that we could take one of the waterways or one of the street ends and actually build a little village around that water where people could actually live there and have their boats right there within their own premises.
Consider how one tiny rooftop garden can brighten the lives of 400 apartment dwellers. People are always more willing to live where they can enjoy a bit of nature. Unfortunately, Seattle is without a major downtown park. There's room for a 53-acre park, bounded by 5th Avenue, 2nd Avenue, and Lenora, a space to complement the noise and activity of the city. Adjacent to the park on the west, where the topography changes, high-density apartments would also have the dramatic western view. Imagine the beauty and meaning of a green belt where it's needed most, in the Denny regrade. Pioneer Square is one of Seattle's greats, a dying great. The triangular parking lot which destroys the unity of the square can be relocated. and in its place a pedestrian park extending to join 4 acres of connected trees, walks, benches, fountains, and flowers. A link between the City Hall complex and the waterfront.
So I have a book now that's about 80 pages that was published by the Downtown Association with John Graham design, where the only building that was left was the Pioneer building. All the rest were high-rise buildings, you know. And that, fortunately, thanks to Bassetti and Steinbrück and the architects' effort and our group, you know, collapsed. I think what we need to do is not look back, but we need the revival of this kind of a spirit today, you know, to bring architects again into the foreground. I'm from Europe, and if I go around Europe, and Americans go to Europe, the places they go to are the Renaissance parts, the Baroque, the Gothic, the Romanesque. And those grew over centuries, and they added sensitively as they continued. The idea in America that we have to destroy everything and then build instantly, it has to be in an incremental process. Let's do selective logging. Let's tear down these lousy little modern buildings and let's build something old.
Well, that's kind of how Seattle works. Seattle likes to plan. In fact, it loves to plan. It just doesn't like paying for them, and it doesn't like implementing them. Of course, now I have to point out that we are at the epicenter of what would have been, had the voters agreed in 1911, would have been the new city center for Seattle here at 4th and Blanchard. This was a Beaux-Arts proposal by Virgil Bogue, who was retained by the city in 1910 to draw up its first comprehensive plan. Seattle is viewed overall as a pretty progressive city, but I think the better adjective is that it is a populist city. And with populism comes a strain of skepticism, suspicion, even paranoia.
Well, extremely important to me is the public realm and how we define the public realm. And that means streets and sidewalks and bridges and building the facades and all those kinds of elements. How we link our neighborhoods is extremely important to me. We need to bridge between our neighborhoods. Currently, the neighborhood plans are very strong, but we don't as a city yet build with those linkages between the neighborhoods. And as architects, we need to seize that and offer suggestions and a plan for our city about how do we improve the pedestrian connections between these neighborhoods. What we do in Seattle in the past, we've done some beautiful things. We've done things like the Montlake Bridge and the University Bridge and things that really define us as a community. Beautiful structures, worked beyond the pure function. There's poetry in those elements. What we need to do as a city is define our infrastructure investments in terms of poetry as well as function. This rail here is a good example. Designed by an engineer, it functions for what it needs to do. Most likely it'll keep a car from going over the edge. Probably kind of keeps pedestrians from walking off the bridge, but it certainly doesn't contribute anything to my spirit and the definition of our community.
Well, you asked me if Seattle were an animal, what would it be? So I made a little sketch, and maybe you want to take a picture of that little sketch.
Oh, my answer is going to be too obvious, so see, I'm not going to surprise you.
At the risk of offending everybody, I think a mongrel dog is my favorite.
Well, I suppose Seattle was a bear and a wolf at one time.
my animal actually would be born with wheels instead of legs. And the head would be very tiny because the animal will have very little brain.
I think Seattle's a harbor seal.
God, I hate these questions.
I'll have to come up with something more surprising, like a cockroach or something.
Seattle is no one place. I mean, you can go to parts of Seattle into Wolfhound. I would rather see it be a sea otter or a beagle, something with a greater sense of humor.
And an antelope, or an elk.
These are horrible questions.
And the body would be a huge muffler spewing garbage and pollution.
A harbor seal's an animal that's really fluid and graceful when it's in the water, but when it comes out of the water, it's a little bulky and unmanageable.
I think maybe today it's a chameleon. You can't tell what it's like. It keeps changing.
I think some form of marine mammal.
I think it would be the same animal that any other successful city is.
It's an animal that, you know, breathes above the water and under the water.
In fact, you can hear it in the trees. A crow. A gregarious, intelligent scavenger.
I suppose if you had to pick an animal, I'd like to pick a Great Dane. I like some some vitality there.
But I think you can find it all here. And so you can't limit it to one animal, but I think a mongrel covers just about everything.
So I guess I would have to say I'm proud that all the animals that the zoo takes care of is associated with the city of Seattle. So we've got a zoo with all those animals that I associate Seattle with.